Hi, Steve Riley. Welcome to this episode of Great Practice, Great Life. And today I am thrilled. I have a long-term friend, business partner, and thought leader at Atticus, Shawn McNalis, joining me today. So, Shawn, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Well,
Glad to be
I don't think I invited you. I think I begged you, Shawn. I think the technical term is begging.
Well, it's more fun if people beg
Yeah.
and just invite. So thank you for that.
Yeah, so it's great having you here. And like I said during the introduction, which Shawn has not heard, Shawn is a incredible thought leader and influencer in our company and in the legal community. She has got her own fan base, but she doesn't like to come front stage too much. She's written multiple books, which we're going to have some of these books highlighted. But today's topic, Shawn, is something that you really drove originally in Atticus as a tool to help lawyers, which is the DISC profile. So today we're talking about really three topics. One is how to understand the DISC, what it is, how's it work. Two, how to use it to your advantage, like helping you put your wind at your back. And three, we're going to do a little bit of discussion about how the DISC interplays in relationships, close relationships like marriage, partnerships, team leaders, people that you work with. And so you've got a long road ahead of you on today's podcast. You ready for this?
I guess I do. You set a high bar here, so good.
Why don't you take it apart? What does the D, the I, the S, C acronyms stand for? And if you're okay, occasionally I'll interrupt with you just because there's some funny jokes I know about, at least I've learned over the years about the DISC.
Feel free. Yeah, so the four dimensions of behavior that the DISC looks at, because it's only measuring observable behavior and it's looking at what drives that behavior. So the D stands for dominance, and this is how human beings handle challenges and problems. So they want to take a look at that. That next they look at I for influence, and this is how we interact and influence people. So you can see that'd be very useful in any law firm in discovering how people interact with their team members or those that answer to them. The S stands for steadiness. And steadiness measures a person's ability to tolerate change and also the pace at which they like to work. And then the C, the dreaded C, measures conscientiousness, which is a little bit confusing sounding, but it's attention to detail and rules and a certain amount of tolerance and preference for analyzing things. So those are the four dimensions that the DISC looks at, figuring, well, if we can figure out how people like to approach problems, that gives us a clue how to work with them. If we know how they like to deal with people, that gives us more valuable information. If we can take a look at their tolerance for risk and change, still more important information. And then their level of, paying attention to the rules and need to analyze, another good chunk of information. So interestingly, the DISC doesn't cover skills or experience or intelligence. It doesn't touch mental illness, patterns of addiction, none of that, even though some of those things are in the psychological realm. It just talks about these observable behavioral preferences and kind of puts them into this model in a way that's more easily understood.
If I walk into a negotiation and I'm aware of the other person's DISC or their client's DISC or what have you, I know I can reach over, and this is not a great example, but I can reach over and emotionally yank the other lawyer's chain if I understand their DISC, just by how I speak to them and how I say things, with the intention of throwing them off. And then I can negotiate and talk differently to their client's DISC. So I can kind of start to use their DISCs to my advantage in the negotiation. And it's not so much I can manipulate them, but I can communicate to each one of them differently and more effectively in that communication.
Right.
Now, so let's talk about the high I, the influencer personality. Now, this is a personality from a rainmaking perspective that you would think to be remarkable because they can go out and they like people. They like to develop relationship with people, and they go out and they meet people. And Shawn, I don't know, you and I have never talked about this. I also noticed that disc profiles influence people's wardrobes. I've also noticed that I can tell people's wardrobes a lot by their, if I looked at someone's wardrobe, they usually are telling me their profile a little bit through their wardrobe, which is a very interesting thing for me. But let's say you're coaching and advising a super high I, a people person. They love everybody, everybody loves them. But usually this type of profile has a very, very big blind spot from a rainmaking perspective.
They do. And that is follow through. So you might so high I's are wonderful. And though we hesitate to say anyone is a natural marketer, they come the closest. We know that any personality style can market very effectively in their own way. But the high I's just have no fear when it comes to meeting new people. They cultivate friendships. They're more likely to have, upwards of between 400 and 500 contacts. So the higher the I they are, the more they go beyond that 100, 150 people that our brains are sort of wired to know. And they're into super networking territory where their desire to know and cultivate people, pushes them to the kind of the upper limits. But when they get together with people, as they often do, a couple of things might happen. One, they'll have such a good time that they'll forget to say anything about, anything to do with marketing. Not the worst thing, because they're great at building rapport, so that can come back to really serve them. But they may make promises in the moment, and they feel it in the moment. Let's get together next week. Let's do this. Let's have lunch. I want you to introduce you to so-and-so. They will make they'll have a lot of ideas. They're ideators. They'll have a lot of ideas. They completely mean it in the moment. But unless they have a team member who can follow behind them and say, okay, now what did you promise to do? When should we touch base with this person? They won't do it themselves. They're not great at the follow through. And they're also not great at strategy when it comes to marketing, because their strategy is to know me is to love me.
So how would you suggest I talk to a high, almost a perfect S, steadfast, and a almost perfect C, who I care desperately about, but I want to help, but not run over the top of? I want to talk to her and help her through this next transition in her life. How do I talk to her?
One of the interesting things that I learned when we surveyed our database for DISC profiles, we decided to do a study on who started law firms, who opened law firms. And we went into this with the hypothesis that high D's and high I's and some combination of the two were the most predominant, DISC profiles to open law firms. What we found was, yes, they're among the most frequent openers and starters of law firms, but C's and S's, I's and S's, across the board, there's a pretty strong distribution of leadership styles that come from, all DISC combinations. And I used to think the lack of a D meant people just could not, they were just so passive and they couldn't get going. But I think what happened to a lot of people that open their own firms was they were, especially if they were, say, a CS like your daughter, They were considered steady and reliable. And somebody, because the S is a people person, a lot of people forget and think only the high I is a people person. The high I loves and cultivates everybody, but they love meeting new people. That's most exciting. A high S loves and cultivates familiar people, their friends, their colleagues, and they can be extremely collaborative. So, and they like harmony. So they lead in a really collaborative way and are some of the best and most empathetic listeners out there. There's a huge level of client service with a CS or SC, whatever the combination might be. High Ds, high Is, selective listeners, right? They will just retain that stuff they deem important.
Well, let's clarify. That's being important to them.
That's being important to them. But an SC, in a law firm, nobody gives better client service than an SC because they've embraced the client on some level after they've got to know them. There's almost an adoption that happens. They will hold their hand. They will get whatever, emotional turmoil is going on. So I think the world is much more open to SCs than I know I originally appreciated before we did this study, because I saw the sheer number of SCs that for whatever reason got the entrepreneurial urge to open their own firm and are thriving. They just have a very collaborative leadership style, empathetic. They get tremendous buy-in for the team. I'm from the team. So I'm saying that there may not be an obvious ambition there, but when your daughter does figure out what her, real goal will be, I'm guessing it's going to be in some way that she can be very collaborative with her colleagues. And as you said, she does take on leadership roles. I would bet in some cases leadership roles are thrust onto her because she has such a good attitude and warmth towards people.